tell me if I'm like going too far with these questions, but I've heard of rape fantasies that some women have, and I was curious on your take on that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking because certainly on a like a very real level, of course, and I think just as a culture, in general, most people would agree that sexual violence against women or men or boys or girls, of course, is not okay. And at the same time, the world of writing and erotica and even porn allows us to explore the fantasies that some of us just kind of innately have in a setting where consenting adults or fictional adults are having these interactions. And so I know for myself, I had started having fantasies or dreams, not necessarily about rape, but certainly about oppression or slavery, like being a slave of some sort, even before I was sexual. So even in like elementary school, before I was having sexual feelings or erotic types of fantasies, I was already having these kind of like daydreams about, being a slave or being controlled by someone. And eventually when I went through, puberty and started, feeling erotic feelings, that eventually turned into certainly rape fantasy or like almost non-consensual experiences in my fantasy world. And I think that I'm certainly not the only woman that has had that experience, or a man that's had that experience.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say about that is it's interesting because even in our culture, I appreciate talking about this because it is taboo. Different people are going to react differently to what I just said, and one of the pieces there for me was that a lot of this information and a lot of the information in my books are from personal experience, but a lot of them are also come to me through my dreams or that kind of fantasy state of mind. And just receiving information through dreams is already in itself a taboo in our culture in some ways. And so, that kind of circles back around to this, like the shadow or the kind of the unconscious, these places where sometimes information or imagery just arises. And I love how erotica and writing and the creative arts and even music give us permission to kind of explore those shadowy places or those places where those images or thoughts that we don't quite know what to do with arise from and kind of turn them into art.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
Yeah. So now it sounds like you're making a huge difference between rape when it happens in reality and non-consensual sex in a fantasy. And I understand that. Now I'm going to just play devil's advocate here. Because with the non-consensual fantasy sex, you could say, okay, so that's like a sex fantasy, and violent rape is a violent crime, a crime of violence. It's not even a sex crime. But some scientists have talked about how when we see a chair, and if we close our eyes and picture a chair in our head, it's like the brain doesn't know the difference. So how would you say that there's still that difference if one is imagined and one is experienced in reality?
Well, I think certainly if I am having the experience of being raped physically, like in the tangible world, by another person, and when I'm having the imagining of being raped, that my body is certainly going to have some kind of physiological response. That actually, I don't totally have a complete answer for you, but this brings up a really interesting point that a friend of mine asked once in a workshop that I took, and he said something like, and this is a whole can of worms, he said something like, it was this very provocative question, so I'll preface it by saying this was meant to be provocative and thought-provoking. It wasn't necessarily meant to make a statement of right or wrong, but he said, if a woman has an orgasm while she's being raped, does that mean she deserved it or wanted it? Woo! That is a whole big old can of worms right there. I would say no. It's ridiculous to say a woman would deserve something that she doesn't want or would want something she doesn't want. And it is interesting as a woman for me, because I was quite young. I think it was in college when I had this question asked of me. Really, I've never thought about that. But yeah, that a woman's body could physiologically have an orgasm while having sex that she was fighting against or really didn't want. And what that's just crazy to wrap my mind around. It's really intense. But it's, the human experience and the delving into right and wrong, and then what actually turns us on in the face of what's actually right or actually wrong is really interesting. What turns us on. Yeah.
Now, as a thriller writer myself, I don't go around killing people. I certainly think killing people is wrong, and yet I write about characters who kill each other. Mm-hmm. Not at the same time, but the point is that, while I don't think it's right to kill someone in real life, I'm okay with writing about it because I feel that I'm giving myself the consent to imagine it happening. And maybe that extends. Do you think that might extend to rape fantasies? Mm-hmm. That you're giving yourself the consent to imagine the experience?
Yes. I would have to say yes. I don't know a single woman who I've talked to, including myself, who hasn't either been raped or inappropriately touched or touched or groped. I don't know a single woman that hasn't had that experience. So having had an experience like that, several in fact, where attention or touching or sex was unwanted, there's no question in my mind that condoning that behavior in real life is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Right. But yes, in my writing, there is a permission that I'm giving myself not only to kind of create a scene that is provocative, but also give myself permission to enjoy it and to be aroused by it in a way that I really wouldn't be in real life. Mm-hmm. That, I guess, going back to the physiological response, that my physiological response in real life might be very different, or has been very different than writing about it. It's two different physiological experiences for me. Yeah, but the permission to explore that and look at that and be turned on by it can feel delicious.
Right.
Yeah. Can of worms.
Yeah. Probably get a lot of comments.
Oh my goodness. Can I take some of that back? I hope people understand what I was trying to say.